Hello and welcome to part 2 of episode 100 of the Movies in a Pod Shell podcast, the podcast where we take a theme and we pick 2 films to fit that theme. But again, not this week for the second time running, not for the next few weeks. This is the Hitchcockathon, which continues to come your way. This week we're going to be discussing what, in my opinion, could be the greatest decade by a single director, which is Alfred Hitchcock. As always, I'm joined by John, and we're very, very happy to welcome back Tony Lee Morale from our previous episode as well, who is what can only be described as a Hitchcock expert. So welcome back, Tony. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again. It was a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll repeat
Excellent.
it.
Well, I hope so. Tony, for anyone who didn't tune into the last episode, please remind them again. What do you do? What have you got? What is it you're up to?
Well, I'm a writer on Hitchcock. I've written 5 books about him, and I'm about to start my 6th book. And one of my books, A Century of Hitchcock, is published next spring, which really celebrates the centenary of his work, because it's going to be 100 years since his first film, A Pleasure Garden, was released.
Super exciting.
100 years.
Yeah, yeah, crazy. And normally we do, and we didn't do this last time, but we normally do. So I don't know, Tony, you mentioned you've been super busy, so that makes me even happier to the fact that you found the time to join us again. Has anyone been watching anything? Anyone been watching anything fun on movies, TV? We always start off with this, but we didn't last episode.
Go on, Tony, you lead us. Have you been watching anything recently?
Well, I've been enjoying Ed Gein on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen it.
Eight-part series, which has got Hitchcockian connotations, because Alfred Hitchcock, they say, the Robert Bloch novel, which Psycho was inspired by, was based in part on the Ed Gein murders. So it's a lot of fun watching how that's really resonated with people, especially on TikTok, because they've kind of adopted that Ed Gein, Anthony Perkins Psycho persona. And it really just goes to show the ramifications and the outreach of Hitchcock even today.
I've not seen this, but a few people have told me about it, and they mention, I hear they mention Hitchcock in quite an unsavory light. Is that right so far, or?
Well, it's not too unsavory compared to other connotations, like The Girl, for example, the HBO movie. It's kind of a harmless look at the making of Psycho, and Tom Hollander plays Hitchcock this time round in unrecognizable makeup. But I think there's a lot of license. I was actually interviewed by Business Insider, you could read about it online, about the truth about the making of Psycho and whether they really were inspired to that extent by Ed Gein. But it's a bit of harmless fun, I think.
Cool, that's interesting. John, what about you? What have you been watching anything fun at the moment?
We'll get on to our screening later, which is obviously more Hitchcock. But last night, really randomly, I watched Alien Romulus 4K because I'd finally caved and bought a 4K player from peer pressure from Jamie for about 3 years. I went to the H&V Vault in Birmingham and spent more money than I care to admit, and then that was one of the first ones I bought. But anyway, thoroughly enjoyed making the most of the new system, so that was good. But I hadn't seen it since the cinema. I won't delve too much, Tony, because we're here to talk about Hitchcock today. But it's funny how I initially really liked the film, and I still do like it. But it's funny how, like, first time watch the stuff you miss, then you watch it the second time, and I just didn't realise how much the android gets knocked about in the film. And it's like a central plot point is basically he needs rebooting like every 15 minutes, and the film's 2 hours long, and it's pretty much on the dot every 15 minutes he needs rebooting. It's quite irritating on a second watch. But anyway, apart from that, all good. What have you been watching, Jamie? I've seen on Instagram you've been on a bit of a Taken binge.
I don't know what I've been doing really. So I randomly watched a film called The Grey with Liam Neeson, which I'd seen at the cinema. I think it was just after. I think it might have been 2011 or 2012. It's essentially a group of people get stranded. It really reminded me of the film Alive, but with wolves. And so they're just being hunted by a pack of wolves, really. And Liam Neeson is the one to kind of bring them to justice, bring the wolves to justice. So a lot more fun than I remembered, actually. So I enjoyed it. And then I don't know why, but I just continued to watch Liam Neeson. So I rewatched Taken, the first Taken, and which is still holds up. I mean, the acting is a bit shonky at the beginning. His daughter in the film, I can't remember her name, Maggie something or other.
Maggie Grace.
That's it. Yeah, Maggie Grace. She does do a lot of running around, and she runs very funny. So but I do enjoy it. It's got the greatest voicemail of all time potentially.
Absolutely. And
I then watched Taken 2 a few nights ago, and that was nowhere near as good as I remember. I mean, they're getting kidnapped for probably 60 minutes. So that's it's fine. They probably should have just stopped, and at Taken 1. But here we are. But that's kind of all I've been watching. I continue to watch The Studio on Apple TV, which is genuinely fantastic, and I would highly recommend that for anyone who loves films. The Studio it's hilarious, and yeah, they just nail it. Like, they nail all the kind of the meta kind of A24 stuff, and like these like independent directors wanting to do something really deep in the studio. We're just like, look, just make the blockbuster. It's that kind of thing. So I'd highly recommend that on Apple TV. So yeah, but obviously we are not here to talk about what we've been watching. We are here to talk about Alfred Hitchcock in we're going to kind of talk about the late 40s, early 50s. John, on Saturday, the 29th, just gone, you'll be listening to this on the 6th probably, we successfully hosted our Hitchcock double bill, where we played Notorious and Vertigo back to back. It was quite full, which was very good, yes. And it went down a storm. So, for example, my brother, who has never seen a black and white film in his life, came out of Notorious in a little break, and he's like, I could not take my eyes off that. I loved it so much. And we had lots of really, really good feedback, and it was a great day, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, thank you for everyone who did come out to support the event, really. Like, it was really good fun. Really enjoyed it. And again, Notorious, I hadn't seen on a cinema screen, so that's always like great to be able to see these films in their natural home, I suppose. I had seen Vertigo at the cinema before. I've said it many times on the pod, but it's one of my first Hitchcock experiences in a cinema, and it just completely blew me away that I could be that invested in something, and a massive obsession afterwards and reading all about the production behind the scenes of that. But no, really enjoyed the day. Nice we got to hang out with a few people afterwards as well, so that's really good fun. But also, having then watched Notorious, I was trying to not read too much about it before we watched it at the cinema, because I wanted to kind of just enjoy it for what it is. I had seen it, but many years ago, and I was really shocked how intricate the camera moves are in that film. So, Tony, I'm sure you can talk to us about this, but especially with the sequence in the wine cellar and it all building up to the, plotting out the keys and like knowing that the wine bottle's going to smash, will it get found out, all of that. And I think that's what really engaged your brother Jamie as well, like we were talking about those kind of sequences. But just the camera work feels very modern for a film of 1940, I want to say
1946.
Sorry. But yeah, Tony, do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I know it's covered in the storyboard book as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Notorious was one of the films during the Selznick period, but Selznick was busy, and so he asked Hitchcock to both produce and direct it. And as we spoke about last time, Selznick was very hands-on with his jigsaw, Hitchcock's jigsaw cutting, which he really drove him crazy, because Hitchcock would dictate the shots and the editing. But now with Notorious, he had free reign, and so he just had this dream cast with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman and Claude Rains, and it was just a perfect triangle. And you almost feel very sympathetic to Claude Rains' character, because he's the one who's being betrayed by Bergman, who he truly loves. And so that's just a clever thing about Hitchcock, is turning things on their head like that. And so
it's the moral. I was reading about how he liked the characters who are doing bad things for you to almost sympathise with them, to then start questioning yourself, the kind of like who you're aligning with. And I thought that was interesting because it's similar in, we talked recently about Sabotage, is that right? Yes. And then in that film it tries to get you to relate from the other side as well, so he's got a good knack for that. Even in Psycho, it's like, do you want him to get caught? There is the element of when the car's going down and you're going, is that car going to sink fully or not, you know? So it's just the twisted way he makes you like think on that line of thought.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and there's a very good example which we can talk about coming up, Strangers on a Train, if you can remember it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned Claude Rains, because his performance in Notorious is really, really good. And it does give you that moral dilemma of, and you do feel really sorry for him, because it's all just I love the bitterness of both men in this over Ingrid Bergman. Well, all three of them really. That they're all so bitter about the situation that they're in, and the way Cary Grant kind of, the jealousy that they both show, T.R. Devlin and Alexander Sebastian, the jealousy they both show against each other, because Cary Grant doesn't want to lose her, and she has to do this for the country, and it's just fantastic. And Claude Rains is great. Like the ending sequence of Notorious is probably one of my favorites actually. And when they're coming down the stairs, and they're you don't know whether they're going to get in the car or not. So it was fantastic, and it went down a storm. I'm really pleased that we chose that over Shadow of a Doubt, because I think Shadow of a Doubt is a bit more of, just a bit more. It's a bit slower
as well.
Yeah, it's a bit slower, and obviously Vertigo following that. They would be two relative. I would describe Vertigo as it is quite slow, isn't it? It's long, and it's
quite trancy almost. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. Like it just is. But yeah. So we can talk quickly then about Hitchcock moves to Hollywood in 1939. Yeah. Lived in Bel Air. Tony, can you talk a little bit about Hitchcock? Like, so he obviously, I know a little bit about his routine and stuff, but his home and his lifestyle, like he was quite a man of bit of a homebody.
He was, when they first moved to Hollywood. They were under the care of Marcella Rabwin, who was an assistant for Selznick, and I cover this in this, the Century of Hitchcock. And he went ahead before Pat and Alma came to join him, and they rented him a house in Bel Air. But he was very much a homebody. He didn't like going out. He always said that, you know, even when he became a very famous director during the peak of Psycho and beyond, he had a very set routine. He and his wife Alma would have dinner every Thursday night at Chasen's, which was a famous restaurant in LA. They would have the same table every Thursday night. His world was very much that of routine, and that's why he dressed the same every day. You know, a dark navy suit and tie. He was a man of habit and discipline and order, hence his note taking and his storyboards and his production notes, and having a familiar crew around him, which really exemplified the 50s. And that was a mark of success of a 50s film. Having the same DP, having the same continuity, having ADs where possible that he was familiar with, especially from the Alfred Hitchcock Presents series. Yeah. So he was very much someone who liked his comforts, liked his wine, liked his food. But again, that kind of fear of the unknown, fear of the dark, harking back to that 5-year-old in a police cell. He didn't like anything which was unpredictable.
Cool. Like I love that. And so when would you say that Hitchcock really, because I do want to speak on a little bit later on how Hitchcock essentially, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but people often describe him as one of the first real celebrity directors, the household name that everyone knew. When would you say that was really coming to fruition, like in the 50s? When did he kind of start really rising above? I guess he was on the not as well known as the likes of Cary Grant, but when did he kind of step into that kind of fame?
I think it started before the 50s, definitely. You know, with the success of Rebecca as Best Picture, even though he didn't win for Best Director. But he followed that up quickly with films like Foreign Correspondent, Shadow of a Doubt, and then the movies with Bergman, Ingrid Bergman did very well, especially Spellbound and Notorious. So he really was on the rise throughout the 40s. He had a couple of flops which didn't do so well at the box office, like Rope and Under Capricorn, and he even stage fright at the beginning of the 1950s with Marlene Dietrich. But he had established his name above the title by then. You know, it was Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, or Alfred Hitchcock's Dial M for Murder. Right. He was very much a name above the title director. And he had built his cameo, the very quick cameo, and so audiences were very familiar with him as a figure and a brand, more so than many other directors because of that.
Right. Oh, yes, the cameo at the beginning of pretty much, well, the majority of his films. Okay, cool. Bro. So then you mentioned Strangers on the Train, which I feel like that's one of your favourites from this era. Am I right in thinking that?
Definitely. It's one of those black and whites which I think is up there, like Notorious. I mean, Robin Wood famously says it's the first black and white film which you could arguably call a masterpiece from Hitchcock. Yeah. Many would agree that Notorious would fulfill that category. And so it has all the classic ingredients of Hitchcock: the debonair villain, the wrongfully accused man, the kind of duality, Bruno and Guy, and he takes that further from Rope. You know, Farley Granger is in both of those films, and also the kind of sympathy and empathy with the villain, because the Bruno character is quite extraordinary, played by Robert Walker, and you sympathise with him, or you identify with him. He's a lot more charismatic than Farley Granger's character, who plays Guy, the tennis player. And so it's that kind of transference as well, which he loved, casting against type. And so Robert Walker at the time was known for playing heroes, GIs, Joes, and returning heroes and boyfriends next door, just like Anthony Perkins in Psycho.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't known to be playing psychopathic villains who go around strangling women. And so that was Hitchcock so good at. He was very good at subverting the audience expectations with casting.
Yeah, brilliant. And his own daughter Patricia was in this film, wasn't she?
Yeah,
as Barbara.
Yes, she has that cameo, and when Robert Walker's character sees her at the party, he's reminded of Guy's ex-wife, Miriam, and almost strangles a woman at the party because he's looking at Pat Hitchcock with the same spectacles.
Yeah. So lots of strangling and stabbings in a lot of his films. I had to not watch this film when I was doing lots of my rewatches, because I had to pick and choose kind of the main ones, because it's simply not doable when he's got maybe 100 films. But I love the fact that the carousel at the beginning, at the top, at the end, they had to use a miniature for that, a miniature replica on a soundstage, because it was too dangerous to film a fight on a real moving carousel, which, so again, just shows his innovation that he was kind of doing from such an early time.
I would like to speak about, sorry, we seem to be going in films in ish order. Dial M for Murder, I read up a little bit more on this week, and it was interesting because apparently the attraction to that was it was effectively in one location. He didn't have to leave one studio. So it was literally like, it's a stage play based essentially in one location. He obviously toyed with that in Rope. He hadn't done Rope at this point, had he?
He had.
He had to Rope.
Yes,
right,
Dial M for Murder, he says, was a chance for him to recharge his batteries. Because, and why not? You know, as you say, one location, the studio. It was Grace Kelly's first film, so that was a huge plus for Hitchcock.
Yeah.
But yeah, he needed to. But I think he just done a few heavy films, and he wanted to balance it with something quite lightweight.
So he just done before that, so it went after Rope, it was Under Capricorn, Stage Fright, Strangers on the Train, I Confess. So Dial M for Murder is a bit more, it doesn't feel Hitchcockian at the end, it feels very resolved and very very light and
Yeah.
But what I do like about it is reading about the fact as well that Hitchcock, I think, attempted to make it before and people weren't so interested. But then when he said he'd make it in 3D, which was the fad at the time, which he said it was actually, the fad was fading out by the time he made it in 3D. But he was delighted because it just gave him full control to basically do what he wanted. But I've never seen it in 3D. I must say, I've only ever seen it in 2D. But apparently he's got very good placement for the scene in it. So it'd be quite interesting to try and see it in 3D at some point. I don't know if you have. But yeah.
I think when it first showed, it was mainly showed in 2D. But it's a classic example of him using the latest fads and gimmicks and the latest techniques to try and attract an audience. Because you have to remember, this is also the advent of television. So cinemas were really trying to fight to win audiences and trying to
lavish productions, VistaVision, and all those big USPs. I mean, I feel like we're almost going through that again now. I mean, so much of the time promotional campaigns talking about IMAX, and I mean, what does IMAX mean anymore? Because IMAX formats are actually really varied. It's not as simple as saying it's shot on one IMAX camera. There's loads of digital ones that have certain specs that classify and all this, but using I wouldn't call IMAX a fad, but in terms of like promoting why you need to get away from your streaming TV and Netflix, this is what you've got to come and see. But I just wanted to touch on, after you've done Dial M for Murder, or Hitchcock's done Dial M for Murder, you've then got Rear Window, which again is another single location piece. So it's almost like he was perfecting that down, and then I would probably say Rear Window is the perfect version of that, where you've literally built all these apartments. You're seeing it from Jimmy Stewart's point of view throughout the entire film. The voyeuristic perspective keeps it interesting because he said at the time in the Truffaut interview, he talked about how he liked the idea of montage, and it was the classic, it showed the same a clip of someone's reaction but changed the clip in front of it multiple times. So one time it was a lady undressing, another time it was a dead something, and basically the reaction was the same, but the way the audience read it was different. And then he plays on this so much in Rear Window, and it's got the Hitchcockian, has the neighbour murdered someone? Have they not? And also Grace Kelly, so who is $1 million in the film. So I just wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about Rear Window and how it kind of felt like the culmination of all those single set pieces coming together from Lifeboat, Rope, Dial M for Murder.
Absolutely. I mean, Hitchcock loves studio filming. He didn't like location filming because of the weather. He wanted to control the lighting. I mean, he was a control freak. He wanted to control everything, from the performances to the lighting to the sets. So you can see how Rear Window really is, it's called the Master's Dollhouse. You've got Hitchcock, the maestro, conducting all these little stories in the Greenwich apartments, from Miss Torso to James Stewart, to the married couple, to Miss Lonely Hearts, to Raymond Burr's fantastic character who plays a traveling salesman who kills his wife. So it really is the epitome of control in this fantastic Greenwich set, which he built on location. And as you say, to top it all, he's really got the biggest doll in the doll's house, who's Grace Kelly, and he loves showing her off in all those Edith Head costumes.
Yes, very much so. And Edith Head, again, was a long-term collaborator. I noticed her name pop up in Notorious as well, so she'd obviously seen through the leading ladies from Ingrid Bergman then over to Grace Kelly.
Yeah, Edith Head was the costume or production design? Costume, yeah. She worked on pretty, you name it, every film, like Some Like It Hot, like any big film around that era, she was all over it, which is, I mean, what I love the most about Rear Window is the fact that, well, it's not Rear Window actually, it's the fact that it spawned so many incredible films that I love in that type. So that's Alfred Hitchcock at his voyeuristic extreme, isn't it? And one of my absolute favorites, which is essentially, it's like Rear Window but make it sexy, is Brian De Palma's Body Double from 1984. That's one of my absolute favorites, and I've wanted to do it on the pod for quite a while, but I think John had a little bit much of Brian De Palma when we've done a couple of Brian De Palmas, and he's...
I know, what was the one we watched with the Michael Caine one? What was the Michael Caine one?
What I don't know. Mate, Michael Caine's done lots of films. No idea.
So sorry, the De Palma one where it was really Hitchcockian was the one where it's the street worker at the start and
yeah. That is Dress to Kill. Dress to Kill.
Dress to Kill.
So Brian, yes. So and you've obviously got the other films like Peep and Tom as well, which is obviously a massive, that considered maybe one of the first ever slashers, you know, as well as Psycho, which is in the same year. But also even modern stuff like Shia LaBeouf's Disturbia from 2007, which is again one of my I say guilty pleasures. I think it's quite decent. But
there was a Christopher Reeve remake, wasn't there? Am I making that up? There's a Christopher Reeve remake or very similar where he's sat out the window.
Yes, yeah? You're right. Sadly, after Christopher Reeve had his horse riding accident, he was left, a paraplegic, and so he took on the role, James Stewart role, to play.
Was that a TV movie or was it an actual release? I remember watching it, but many years ago.
And what's it called?
I cannot remember.
Okay, well, this is good listening for everyone. That's a proper deep cut, that is. But yeah, I think Rear Window is really, when I was talking about, it's a 1998 Rear Window, yeah. That's
there you go, see that, okay, take it back.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well done, what a deep cut from you, John. I didn't even know that existed. That's crazy. But I think Rear Window for me, like the extreme you went to build that set as well. Like an actual set on a soundstage with 31 apartments is just insane, and that's kind of like is at the point where like he's so big that no one says no to him.
Yeah. Well, Paramount at that point, his contract with Paramount, my understanding is that he basically had the full creative control. Is that right, Tony? He was the king, right?
Yes, he always had battles with the censors though, because which really annoyed him. And so there's a few risque things in Rear Window, as you can imagine. Some suggestive dialogue. He loved pushing the envelope. You know, with Grace Kelly saying she was going to stay the night with James Stewart. And that was quite risky for 1954 because they weren't married and she bought a negligee. So it's things like that. So he wasn't king. You know, he didn't have carte blanche. And like with Psycho, he was pushing the envelope as well with the censors. So he always had to answer to them. Yeah.
Famously, he was the first person to be able to show a toilet, wasn't he, on screen? Because
the
censor was so shocked. Yeah, the censor was so shocked by the stabbing that they completely ignored the toilet flushing. I just wanted to touch upon that filmmaking style. I think of the studio space works really well for some pieces, and then some films not so much. An example for me where it sticks out is actually the next film in his repertoire, which was To Catch a Thief. Now, To Catch a Thief,
watched it last night.
Jamie watched it last night, so we're very apt to talk about. But what I noticed when I watched it the first time is there's some sequences, and it happens in the old Bond films as well, especially Sean Connery era, like those first 3 or 4. There'll be some rear projection shots, and you're thinking you could just go outside. I'm not quite sure why this is the way it is. And I remember To Catch a Thief having quite a few of those, and I'm not just driving scenes, but just like in a restaurant outside. And I thought surely, and I remember by the time you get to Marnie, this critique gets even more amplified, because it's like I think that style of the 70s was the more nitty gritty. I'm jumping ahead a bit, sorry, but that nitty gritty kind of filming more on location and making the most of it. So it almost seems antiquated to have this kind of set bound content. So can you tell us a little bit about To Catch a Thief? Obviously, we know it stars Grace Kelly, we know it's Cary Grant again, but can you just tell us a little bit about that production and what it meant to Hitchcock?
Again, it was a chance for him to recharge his batteries after Rear Window, which was very intense, as you can imagine. And he loved the south of France. For my Century of Hitchcock book, I interviewed the production manager. His name's Doc Erickson, who's sadly passed away now, but he gave one of the few first interviews. And we speak about To Catch a Thief quite a bit. He said it was a glorious time. Grace Kelly was lovely. That's where she met, obviously, her future husband, Prince Rainier, and left to become Princess of Monaco. But he said that Cary Grant was a real pain to work with on location, because he was always complaining about this, that, or the other, and much of it was contrived, according to Doc Erickson. So he had his hands full looking after Cary Grant. But I think he also said that it was one of the crew's favourite films, just beyond the location in the south of France. I also interviewed Brigitte Aubert. She plays the French girl, who turns out to be the cat burglar. And she gave great memories of working with Hitchcock, who she's very fond of. So everyone really enjoyed it. And obviously it's just fantastic and gorgeous to look at, because you've got Cary Grant and Grace Kelly in their prime in the south of France. So what's not there to like?
Sorry, Jerry, you go.
I was just going to say, I watched that after I watched Vertigo. I've seen them before, but the one thing that always reminds me when I go back to these films, particularly the color ones from this era, is just how beautiful and vivid it all looks in VistaVision. Yeah. And it's just like his use of color as well. Like Hitchcock loved to use like quite vibrant colors anyway. But it's just when you look at today, it's just we're so serious about everything. And so
muted color palette is the fashion though as well, because of so quick one about this as well. Like it's also the way it's lit, Jamie. So on those studios,
flat.
like. Well, back in the day, it was quite high contrast and big studio lights, because you need lots of light to get into these cameras, whilst digital cameras can deal really well with low light now. So now we're obsessed with only using natural light or influence light where it comes from. Those rules didn't really apply back in the day, and it was more of an artistic expression, and you get these really interesting creative decisions. And we've spoken about on the pod before, we've lost that. People don't commit to a look or an idea because you can't change that in post. Whilst these films are committing to a very distinctive look, because that's what the look is, and it's baked in like on the film, and it doesn't change, and that's it. Yes, there's some chemical processing you could have done back then, but not massively. But I think it looks amazing. Which leads us on to after To Catch a Thief, a film that I find really interesting because it stands out in Hitchcock's work for me, because he hasn't done many of them, which is comedies in general. Although his films always have an undertone of humour. Tony, The Trouble with Harry, your thoughts on it as a piece, and in terms of any production insight you've got into it, really?
Yes, I asked Doc Erickson, because these are the Paramount films. There were like 5 of them during the 50s, and I asked him about Trouble with Harry. He said it was a mistake that shouldn't have been made. It's almost like an afterthought in many of them in Hitchcock's canon.
Yes. And
I don't know why, because they were on location. If you listen to Shirley MacLaine, who plays a 19-year-old girl, there's interviews with her now on YouTube, and she loved working with Hitchcock. She said that she was his eating partner, and that Hitchcock tried to fatten her up because she was a skinny 19-year-old, and he would choose a location based on the nearest restaurant, which was nearby, because they were filming in Vermont. And
Brilliant.
So it looks gorgeous, the autumnal colours. I think it was just a kind of very slight plot. Probably that's part of the reason, disposing of his dead body. But it's got John Forsythe in it, who's a good character actor, and Edmund Gwynn. So I think it was just one of those. Maybe it didn't relate itself so much as a feature film. Maybe it should have been one of his Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes. I think that's part of the reason there wasn't enough plot involved.
It's interesting because it feels like he talked about in the interview how his favourite kind of humour was like understated, and like he really enjoyed in the film the ongoing joke of how not bothered people were about this dead body and disposing of it, how people's reactions, the classic circumvents what you would expect. People aren't reacting the way you think, people are just very nonchalant about it. But I remember watching it, and it feels almost sing-songy, the dialogue. It just feels really like an odd tone. But what I would say is I only had the 4K, the Blu-ray of it, not the 4K, but it is absolutely stunning. As you said, the cinematography, being in Vermont. And Jamie, like, you're an autumn fan. Some of the autumn shots are incredible. Just honestly, some of the best shots of autumnal trees.
That was a lot of the time. That delayed. So a lot of that delayed the filming, apparently. So it was delayed repeatedly because of the weather. Because it was one that he filmed on location. But sorry, go. No, I was just going to say, like, it is a bit of an odd one from him compared to the rest of his filmography, really. Like, obviously, the closest anything comes to this is the stuff he did in the 20s, probably, like, in terms of, like, the silent stuff, like the comedy stuff. And I'm so happy that he found Shirley MacLaine, because she, shortly after went on to star in one of my favourite films of all time, which is The Apartment. So it's
It's also interesting. Sorry, Joey. It's also interesting that this period that with the films he was delivering, that audiences apparently would get quite upset when it wasn't a usual Hitchcock thriller, and this was one of the ones I think audiences got upset with, because like, we don't want a Hitchcock comedy, we want someone to get murdered, and we want suspense, we want this and that. So he almost got stuck in the David Fincher thing we talked about before, which is when they promoted a lot of his films, they're like, from the director of Seven, he's like, don't put that on the top, because then they're expecting Seven again. I'm not doing Seven again. Like, this is different. And that was for the release of Zodiac. And I feel like Hitchcock had that similar thing all those years before, which was he was being pigeonholed into a certain way. But you can't help but do it when he's so bloody good at it. That was the problem. But you can see why he would be frustrated and would want to make things like To Catch a Thief, which had a lighter tone, which I think he got away with it more in To Catch a Thief because of the star power within it. I think getting Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, you get a bit of a pass. Showcasing the south of France in a point when you can't really travel that easily, and it's still super expensive, you know, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Harry didn't do it done better in Europe than it did in the US.
Really?
because the US audience, because of the type of humor it was very like
Odd.
dry kind of European style humor. So it did better in the Europe than it did in the US. But it would be interesting to know if people would relate to it a bit more today, kind of thing, like, because it just performed badly compared to what Paramount's expectations were.
I suppose like the American audience are far more used to our humour now as well, though, aren't they? Like it's far more that British
of course,
humour is far more.
First
like
Bernard Herrmann
understood.
collaboration, sorry, as well, which is worth noting.
Again, like an interesting one, which I would like to talk about the next film, because it's another curiosity, which is we've got a Hitchcock remake here. We have The Man Who Knew Too Much, this time with Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day. Now, I saw this for the first time this year. It was probably about 6 months ago now. And first of all, you've got, is it the Albert Hall where the concert's taking place? You've got that incredible sequence. Yeah. How to build suspense through classical music. Brilliant. Love it. And to be honest, it reminds me of, and this is a really niche reference, and I apologise, but Jamie knows I love random niche references. Yeah. Jamie, Quantum of Solace, one of my favourite Bond films, randomly. You know when they go to the opera, and then the operas, like the drama happens on stage, and then there's the shooting, and it kind of syncs the sound between the two. Yeah. Definitely influenced by this film, because the orchestral moment is building up to like this big piece of drama. Of like what's going to happen, and it reminds me so much of it, like a modern take of it. But Tony, take us away. Tell us, why did he remake The Man Who Knew Too Much? What was the idea?
He always famously said that the first version was made by an amateur and the second made by a professional. And so it was a case, again, he was always looking for stories to adapt, and it just happened to be a very good story for American audiences. You know, taking a child overseas, abroad, and that child is kidnapped. That's like a parent's worst nightmare. So really tapped into that all-American modern family when they were in Morocco. And so he had the services of big stars, you know, James Stewart and Doris Day, and they were both superb in it. And Doris Day is very much underrated as a dramatic actress, but he saw her potential in films like Storm Warning, and always knew that she could act. I interviewed Doris for the books as well. And again, it was, as we were saying, this division, these Technicolor baubles, because they were trying to compete against television. So the idea of location filming, just like south of France, but in Morocco. And he just felt he could just make it better with the resources he had, with bigger stars, bigger budget, location filming, and certainly ratcheted up the suspense, as you said, with the Albert Hall sequence.
It always feels, it's an odd one for me, because it feels massive at the start. So you're right, location and all that. You feel like you've really done the travelling with them. And then it kind of, large portions of it take place in a church, which feels very set-bound and small. So it feels like a real juxtaposition between the two. Maybe that's part of it, I don't know. But it was an interesting one for me. And also the start of it, Jimmy Stewart's a very different character to... I think my main was it the first one I saw Jimmy Stewart, Rope or Vertigo? I think it was Vertigo, then Rope, either or. But similar-ish character in his portrayal of like who he is, and then watching him as a dad was very different, and that was good for me to see James Stewart not be the same, as it were. You know, it's a bit like Cary Grant is Cary Grant, but he does have different edges in each performance, and it was nice to see Jimmy Stewart as a worried dad. Jamie's quite similar to the plot to Taken, to be fair. His child's taken away, and he has to go and travel across. He doesn't beat as many people up though. He's not quite on it, but there we go. Oh, you muted, Jamie.
I was muted. No, I was going to say, yeah, there's no Albanians getting involved in The Man Who Knew Too Much. No, no, brilliant.
You don't know, though, because we're never told who the foreign powers are. So they could well be Albanians. That's a classic MacGuffin. Yeah.
Who do we think it is? Who would you, if you were to hazard a guess, Tony, who would you think that he was alluding to?
Well, they're trying to kill a foreign dignitary at the Albert Hall. And all we know it's some European power, so Eastern European. So Albania isn't too far away from what Hitchcock is thinking, I think.
There we go. You never know. Who knew The Taken and The Man Who Knew Too Much double bill was coming?
Had a link.
Crazy.
If there's a link to a modern film that shouldn't exist, I will find it.
You will, yeah. Well, Doris Day, she does... I haven't seen this in years, but The Case Sarah Sarah is obviously a really important part, and that song won Academy Award for Best Original Song, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's like obviously the song is used not just to fill time, you know, it's used as a signal to
key plot point, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I talk about this in my masterclass book. I find it very clever. They based it on Richard III. Because the idea of singing as a kind of plot device to draw a character out. And so they've established it in Morocco with Doris Day singing with her son, mother-son bond. And then that plot point is played out when we're in the embassy after the Albert Hall. And that enables the James Stewart character to find him. So it's very clever how they do it.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame we can't go in, like, for the listeners, we can't really dive much deeper than we are into each film because we would be here all night. And we simply can't do it. I guess on to potentially, well, so The Wrong Man. I'll be honest, I can't really speak on it because I've not seen it. So that is one of the ones I haven't seen. Yeah. Tony, is there anything you'd like to mention about The Wrong Man? Obviously, it's, as we know, it's a culmination of what Hitchcock is known for. He's known for, if we want to kind of put him in a box, it is he loves a wrong man.
Yes, and it's also billed, as you see from his intro, it's a true story. One of the few feature films he actually bases on a true story. So it's almost like a documentary. Martin Scorsese loves it. He often cites The Wrong Man in his work. Again, the use of New York and locations. And Henry Fonda playing Manny Ballesteros, the musician. But Hitchcock wasn't just interested in The Wrong Man. He was very interested in what happened to The Wrong Man's wife, played by Vera Miles. And so it's a kind of psychological study of her breakdown. And that's what really intrigued. You know, what happened to Mrs. Manny Ballesteros, because she had a nervous breakdown because of her husband was convicted, and so that was a real source of Hitchcock's interest.
As we're going through these films now, I'm like obviously looking at them, and you think when you name all the actors must have been falling over themselves to work with Hitchcock, because these are huge stars like Henry Fonda, obviously Doris Day was a big star at the time, and all the rest of the usual suspects that are everywhere. Like, and it's just, it's amazing to see like what he's achieved and with who, and who's won. Although he didn't win Best Director, who's won what at what time. There's a Best Cinematographer was won for, I think it was Dial M for Murder when we were looking at that. But it's amazing, really. So I guess we should. So the last few big hitters, well, the last two big hitters from this era.
I think you've got a link there, Jamie, even before that. So you've just said about all the stars he worked with. Vertigo, obviously, we've got Kim Novak and James Stewart, but
yeah,
Tony, who was it? Who did Hitchcock initially want for Vertigo? Because my brain tells me it's not Kim Novak.
No, it was Vera Miles, who we just spoke about. So he discovered her, and she appeared in the first Alfred Hitchcock Presents fantastic episode called Revenge, and he cast her in The Wrong Man, and she was literally all lined up to do Vertigo, but she had done the screen tests, the costume fittings, the hairstyles, but she became pregnant. She was married to Gordon Scott at the time, who was one of the Tarzans. And this really irritated Hitchcock because he said he'd spent a lot of money on Vera Miles. And it's very interesting when we, come to talk about the Tippi Hedren business in the next episode. But he saw these actresses as financial commodities. There's a lot of talk that, he was enamored with them, etc., etc. But he was a very shrewd businessman as well, because he followed his studio system in terms of grooming the stars, not far removed from what Harry Conn was doing with Kim Novak at Columbia Pictures, because this was this era of a studio system in the 50s and early 60s. And so they did have a shortage of stars. And Hitchcock liked his crew, familiar crew. He liked working with Ingrid Bergman and Grace Kelly. They did 3 pictures apiece, but they both left him. Bergman for Rossellini and Grace Kelly for Prince Rainier. So he was on the lookout for his new Grace Kelly, and he thought he found that with Vera Miles. But she decided, family life was more important to her.
And with Vertigo, Jamie, did we do an episode of Vertigo? I can't even remember.
No, we haven't covered Vertigo before. No, okay. We've done 100 episodes, but we've been very selective of because we don't. It's always scary, right? When you're going to do an episode and go deep dive on something like Vertigo, it's so scary that you don't want to mess it up. You'll come away from
the worst.
I'll go away from tonight and I'll be like, I wish I'd have asked Tony that, or I wish we'd have mentioned that, and it always happens
100%.
every time. So that's why we kind of on those ones. It's I'd really want to put a lot of time. Well, I mean, these are a lot of time because there's a great deal of stuff to watch.
I can't believe how many films we've watched, by the way. When we're talking through these, I'm actually really impressed at how many we've been able to watch. But anyway, I'll stop patting us on the back.
So our second film with the double bill that we played at the weekend was Vertigo. So for the first time, I got to see it on the big screen. John, did you talk about the first time you got to see Vertigo on the big screen?
I have mentioned it on the pod again today already, but essentially I saw it in Australia in a film club, and it just blew me away. I think
film club.
Thank you. I think what happened was I think we saw Rear Window the week before, and the week after was Vertigo. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Rear Window, and it captivated me in a different way. But I found, weird thing to say, Vertigo is a quicker pace than Rear Window. But what I would say is, Vertigo it's such a layered plot, because you've got the classic Hitchcock mixed direction. It's like the initial sequence. By the way, sorry, Tony, interesting. We talk about modern audiences and what they think. Someone turned next to me and said immediately at the intro, the start of this is just like The Matrix, because they're running on the rooftops and, there's a chase happening out. And I thought, okay, yeah, I can see a similar link there. I can see what you're on about. But anyway, in terms of a layered plot, so there's the element of having vertigo, then being selected for a case due to this ailment, but not realizing that's the case. The first time I saw it, I thought, is this a Hitchcock horror film? Because it was talking about possession and all this. And I thought, I don't know. I've never seen it. I've read nothing about it. I thought, and to be fair, for the first 40 minutes, I thought this could possibly go that way, which is very strange, but why not? Because he is into weird, macabre things, so I could see it. And then, you've got all the psychological explosion, what actually happens and the manipulation of what it is. You've got the Hitchcockian element of the fact of, Tony's literally just talked about the molding of these stars, because they're these money vessels essentially that will help him moving forward. And this film is a literal representation of taking someone and molding them and shaping them to look like your ideal version of a person who didn't really exist in the first place, or did, but it was an idealized version. And the layers to it, you can see why it's so highly rated. But the biggest thing for me, and I haven't even mentioned it today, is Bernard Herrmann's score. I mean, I genuinely think it's probably one of the best scores of all time. And I mean, I know that's a big statement. I know people are going to shout at me, John Williams, Jaws, Star Wars. Agree. But in terms of like this era, it sounds so dramatic, but it does move you when you hear it stirring. You can feel every emotion of Jimmy's frustration. Keep calling Jimmy Stewart like I'm his best mate. But you know that, and like that whole sequence of when he wants to relive it and he wants to get up those bloody stairs and wants to get past it, and like the drama and the music and the swell, it's incredible. I know it references, I'm going to get this wrong now, my dad's going to tell me off, I feel like it's Tchaikovsky, but I can't remember.
It's actually reminiscent of Tristan and Isolde is Wagner.
Thank you. I will definitely.
Your dad is going to tell you off.
I'm going to be in trouble. But yeah, in terms of like even referencing that piece of music in any way, shape, or form, it's just incredible. I could listen to it on repeat, honestly, but hearing it in the cinema, in context, love it. Sorry, that was a big rant. Tony, tell us about the first time you saw Vertigo, thoughts on it, production, etc. Speak to us.
Well, like many, I was blown away when I saw Vertigo. I think I was 19, going through a very big Hitchcock period when I was watching all his films, you know, whether they were on television or on those good old VHSs at the time that you'd rent out from a local store. And so, again, I loved the music. I loved the set design and the location filming, that kind of very ghost-like quality in San Francisco. It was just incredible. So it's like a hypnotic dream watching it, isn't it? I have distanced myself from it since multiple viewings. I can't remember how many times I've seen it. It must be about 50 times, you know, at some shape or form during you know, the course of the last 30 years of my life, I think. But there are people who watched it 100 times, and it's voted number one in the Sight and Sound poll, for number one for very good reason. I'm not sure I would say it's the best Hitchcock film now. You know, there's one which we're going to come on to, which I think might be even better than Vertigo, but it's certainly up there. And then again, because of the idea of, I think most people agree it's the best film because it touches on human emotions and significance and the idea of the idealization of love. I think that's a kind of a pinpoint, as you say, that kind of romantic love which a lot of people have, and how you want to see. A lot of people project something on another person, or they want them to be someone else, and they don't see the person; they see the idealization of a person. And I think that's why Vertigo is so powerful for many people.
Yeah, it's, I think so. So strangely, on the day that we screened it, most people. So there were people that actually turned up for that viewing. There were people that people that left at the end of Notorious, strangely, and there were people that turned up for Vertigo. Yeah. Most of the people that I spoke to preferred Notorious to Vertigo.
Yes.
I don't know whether that is because of the pacing. This obviously wasn't received well at the time, was it, Vertigo? And it kind of grew into the audience, and it's people, as you alluded to, Tony, like people consider this Hitchcock's masterpiece, really, and it's got the way it kind of looks at the psychology and the male obsession and the male gaze and almost like narcissism. It's and the way it pulls the rug from underneath you. There were people in there that didn't know it twice. There were people in there so there was a lad sitting to the right of me and John, and when the initial I don't know is it Madeline that dies first? Yeah. When Madeline falls from the clock tower, which doesn't exist and didn't exist at the time, by the way, they painted it on the film. This lad was hand on the back of his head,
full hand on
like,
head.
Oh my god, like this. And then the second time, same thing again.
Couldn't believe
to see the reactions of people like that. And this lad was probably in his early 20s. It was just amazing to see that it still has that It still has that
draw and intensity
yeah.
that people can relate to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess so there's some things in the film like that a friend of mine mentioned. She said, I really this is very sexist, isn't it? And I was like, well,
it's very of its era, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely very of its time, and obviously the comment that Jimmy Stewart makes to Kim Novak saying, "Whoa, what do you care about the way you look anyway?" Like this kind of thing when he's trying to get
the colour of your hair. What's it matter to you?
What does it matter to you? Yeah.
Jimmy.
But obviously you've got like Scorsese, Brian De Palma, David Lynch, all Paul Schrader as well, like all saying like how much this film has kind of influenced their careers over the years, and it's just one of the best shot films that obviously we've got to talk about. I spoke about it at the beginning when we introduced Vertigo and Notorious, the Vertigo zoom, like the dolly zoom,
yes,
to kind of show Scotty's acrophobia, and it's stuff like that. And you kind of see it just over 10 years later in The Shining. You see it like people have kind of evolved that, and it's still used today. And it's just
Jaws
kind of
is the
another
one
example.
I always think of the guy on the
Jaws.
beach in Jaws feels like the biggest
exactly.
like example of your head, like when you like pops your mind. Yeah,
but it is. I think it's probably not my favorite Hitchcock, because I
Really?
do probably say I would say it's maybe 15 minutes too long. Maybe.
I don't care. I just wallow in it. It feels like it feels like it sounds really weird. You know, there's certain films that just work better on a Sunday on a slower day. Like Vertigo for me is
I agree, yeah.
Another one
Well,
like that motion
yeah.
picture, but it's the slower pace, it's the tone, it's the tranciness of it. I think I could just watch it for the score, to be honest. But like Tony, I think he said the word hypnotic or dream state. I can't remember quite what you said, sorry, earlier. And that is what it is to me, because there's very long sequences, and I understand why people might not like this, by the way. Very long sequences where nothing is said, it's all through action is leading the story, which is so impressive, because you could basically watch that film on mute and still have a good gist of what is happening through. And Lucas talks about this. That's like the greatest form of filmmaking, is if you can basically have it on music and still understand it. And I feel like this film has that, but obviously don't take that audio away from me. But,
yeah, it's good because it's not just a 3-part. It's you've got your middle, your beginning, middle, and end. Yeah. This is more like a 4-part. Like we talk about kind of films. Sometimes they have 4 parts to them, and this definitely does. It's one of those films. It's complex, and it really did. Just brilliant. But yes, Tony, we're gonna.
Sorry. Just before we move on, and Tony, I wanted to raise a point. I read recently, and I found this really interesting, that some of the things the critics didn't like really amused me, because I think they're some of the things that really stuck out and work. Which is, they didn't like the Saul Bass title sequence. They thought it was, a bit artsy and out there, and they didn't like the dream sequence with Jimmy Stewart, which I think is 2 of the best sequences within. And they didn't like the rotating bass scene when he's kissing Kim Novak, and then there's the different imagery behind. Those are some of the key. Sorry, my light's just gone off. Those are some of the key moments for me that work so well. But it's so interesting. Those are the things people didn't like at the time. I just wondered if you had any insight on that.
I think it was a time when critics became increasingly annoyed with Hitchcock because they thought he was taking himself too seriously, and they were just expecting your standard thrillers, and these were kind of arty and deliberate points, as you say, the Saul Bass credit sequence, the hypnotic spirals, vertigo spirals coming out of the eye at the beginning, as you say, the rostrum with Kim Novak and Jimmy Stewart. It was all carefully thought out by Hitchcock, but I think a lot of critics, especially Bosley Crowther, New York Times, one of the critics called it Hitchcock and Bull story, because the plot, as you can imagine, is actually quite far-fetched, because no one would kill his wife that way, hire a double and pretend to throw her off the bell tower. Yeah. It's pretty silly when you really break it down. But that didn't really matter to Hitchcock. It was the psychology. And it was actually based on a short French story. Yes. From Amongst the Dead was the kind of working title. And so that was the intrigue of Hitchcock.
Someone we were with on the day mentioned that they thought that Vertigo probably would translate slightly better to the story, in a book, especially because you've got Kim Novak playing the two characters, and in the book, maybe you obviously wouldn't know that it was still Kim Novak, but obviously in the film, I mean, the way they do the hair at the front and it's fantastic.
People were split on the audience, so we had quite a few first-time watchers. They were really split on if it was the same person or not. Some people hadn't got a Scooby till the letter was going, and then they were like, "Really?" And then other people were like, "Well, clearly it is." The first time I saw it, I'd be honest, I didn't know it was the same person the first time. I remember the first time I saw it, the same it blew my mind. So I think she does look so different with the curls at the front, as Jamie's mentioned, the eye makeup, whatever it is, eyeliner. I'm rubbish at this, but you know, crazy. But yeah, it was just wanted to get that in about Vertigo, but it was just so nice seeing it with some people as a first time audience and just seeing reactions, because like there's one thing watching these films and you sit at home and you like the bits you like or whatever, but seeing it in a communal experience is different, and that's one of my proudest things from doing the screen. I say proudest, Jamie did most of the work, so I'm not going to take any credit, but in terms of like attending the screening, let's say, is having that communal experience of it, which might sound slightly pretentious, but it's true. Like hearing people laugh at Notorious at points that I might not laugh or whatever, it's just such a nice thing. And when like people are so invested and so like, please don't find the wine bottle or whatever it is, just experiencing that in a group setting is just very different. And I haven't had that for a long time. Sorry, Joey.
Well, no, I was literally before we're going to move on to Tony's favorite Hitchcock film. But also I did just want to mention like Jimmy Stewart's comedic timing. Now, Cary Grant's very funny, but I think Jimmy Stewart has the edge when it comes to comedy, and he is just so funny in Vertigo. He's just his chemistry with.
It's funnier than I remembered, actually. Vertigo. There's actually quite a few good jokes in it, or just I just suppose it's his demeanour more so, but him and
his chemistry with the woman that is it Marjorie?
Midge.
Midge. Barbara Bel Geddes.
Yeah, the woman that woman he's just got great chemistry with her. Their relationship's kind of, it's another little thing that you notice when you're watching it, you know. But I want to talk about Jimmy Stewart's and Cary Grant's relationship with Hitchcock, but we'll do that after. We can talk about North by Northwest, which is starring Cary Grant, Hitchcock's favourite actor. So he says. But yeah, so Tony, this is your favourite Hitchcock film, am I right?
I would say it was one which should be preserved for infinity. If someone's introduced to a Hitchcock film, I would introduce them to North by Northwest. I think it works on so many levels. You know, I've seen it in outdoor screenings with general audiences. It's always shown, you know, on a matinee on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. It's got a tremendous score by Herman. It's got Cary Grant. A debonair villain in James Mason. I think Eva Mary Saint is a good Hitchcock blonde, but she's not the best. I think she's the only real weakness in the entire film, to be honest. But she's certainly serviceable in it, and it's just got those great locations, starting in New York and then going on the 20th Century Limited to Chicago, and then the Mount Rushmore sequence. So I talk about it a lot in the Storyboards book, especially the Crop Duster and that fabulous Frank Lloyd Wright house, the modernist house, which very much inspired the James Bond villain, the Lairs, you know, the fantastic Lairs with super architecture. But I think it's just a general crowd pleaser, a big gourmet sundae, which makes a good Hitchcock film.
I did enjoy Cary Grant saying he'd read the script over 20 times and he still couldn't make head nor tail over it, and he just kind of went, do you know what, it just is what it is, I'm just going to go with it. So.
The thing that I love North by Northwest, and we've spoke about it on the pod before, John, that this is the closest to a Bond film, isn't it? If Hitchcock made a Bond film, this is kind of this is as close as you're going to get from it. And obviously Cary Grant was actually asked to be in Dr. No, and he said yes, but he only wanted to do Dr. No because of his age, and they wanted him to sign on for longer, so they chose Sean Connery instead.
Just to say on that as well, though, like obviously in From Russia with Love, there is a sequence which is very reminiscent of North by Northwest, which is a plane shooting at Connery as he's running away after they've got off the boat. I'm pretty sure it is. I've not watched it for a few years, so don't get me wrong.
I believe I write about it. I think it's a helicopter the helicopter chase
apologies,
sequence, which emulates the crop duster. But yes,
absolutely.
You've got the crop duster and you've got the Mount Rushmore, and it's just completely iconic. And even before you've even seen North by Northwest, well, nowadays for me, I'd seen that scene on the crop duster. I'd seen that scene,
yes,
fighting on Mount Rushmore, and we did have some questions just around that. So someone mentioned like North by Northwest is his closest action film for sure. Well, it is essentially borderline action film. But what would you guys say if you had to pick a Mount Rushmore of Hitchcock films, what would they be? They don't necessarily have to be your favorites, but maybe they could be your best, or maybe even you might want to pick one from each era, whatever you feel like. But what would your Mount Rushmore of Hitchcock films be? Well,
sorry, I don't know who's going first. I don't mind leading. Okay, so I think I hate to say it's basically that Paramount era, isn't it? There's a reason why all the Blu-ray box sets are usually of the Paramount era. I do think it's probably the best. So in Rushmore standards, I mean, for me, what is Rushmore 4 or 5, Jamie? Before I embarrass myself not knowing how many faces are on Mount Rushmore.
I feel like it's 4.
It's 4. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So I would say number 1 for me will forever be Vertigo. It's probably not the biggest crowd pleaser, but it's for me. I'm going to go 2 at Marnie, controversial, but just an opinion. 3, I'm going to go North by Northwest, and 4, I'm going to go The Birds. And again, I know that's quite a random selection, but those are the ones that I have rewatched the most. They're the ones I've enjoyed the most.
I'm surprised at that, I'll be honest.
I think I'm just obsessed in that era with the VistaVision era, with that level of production, whatever it may be. There's just something about it. I've really enjoyed some of the older Hitchcocks, and maybe I would have put some of those in there too. But in terms of rewatchability,
you carve out a fifth face, would you?
I carve out a fifth face. But those are the ones that I turn back to and constantly watch. I would always avoid Torn Curtain like the plague, though, because I feel like all the ones I watched, that one just really didn't get on with me. Anyway, sorry, Tony.
I would start definitely with Notorious, even though I've got a real fondness for the 39 Steps.
Yeah.
I would say Notorious. I would say Rear Window, Vertigo, and probably end it with Psycho. So those 4. I mean, most people, would say Psycho is a pinnacle of Hitchcock. So you've got to include that in the Mount Rushmore. Yeah.
Can I be really weird then? So, I'm sorry, but you know me. I always throw a curveball in there. So I'm gonna I
put Marnie in there. That's a curveball, mate.
It is a curveball. When I say my Mount Rushmore, I'm gonna say my Mount Rushmore is the ones I would want to show people.
Okay.
And I would show them Sabotage first, because that really is a new favourite. I know I keep going on about it. It's either Sabotage or Lifeboat, and those two would just really stand out for me. And I just thought they were fantastic. I'll put Sabotage on there. Can I have 2 Mount Rushmores? Then I would probably I feel like I would put Rear Window on there, because I would want to show people how much it's influenced modern cinema in general. With,
to be fair, I probably should have got Rear Window in there. Of the ones I missed out, I wouldn't put Psycho in there personally, but anyway,
I must put Psycho in there. So Psycho must go in there, because it is kind of a slasher. I would always quote it as a slasher, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I think it's again, it's just it's still scary today. I think it's. I can't wait to talk about that. When I look at the next episode, it's insane actually. And the last one I'm going to put on the list, which is really just to kind of show people how, I guess, what a wide range of skills Hitchcock's got. I don't know how this will go down, but I'd put Frenzy on there, because I love Frenzy. And maybe this
did love Frenzy, didn't you, when we watched it?
Yeah, because Frenzy for me, I'm not going to spoil too much now, but Frenzy for me is obviously it's in the 70s. We've lost Hays Code, so he can basically do what he wants at this point.
It is shocking at the start as well.
And it's kind of shows you essentially what he would have been doing throughout the whole of the 50s, and like really like if he could, and I just think it's really dark, and it's his version of a giallo, really. Like it's like an Italian giallo, and is this his first film when he goes back to the UK? Am I right in thinking that? I don't know.
Okay, that's pretty much Stage Fright.
Yeah, so there you go. That was I just think that Frenzy is a film that not a lot of people ever talk about, and I'll talk about it loads more on the next pod for sure. But I
think also Frenzy is a big step up from what came before it, because I feel like, well, maybe we'll talk about this more next week, but Topaz is seen as one of his worst, isn't it, Tony, in general, in terms of it's the one that's usually called the mistake in his career. I'm not 100% sure why, but I am going to try and watch it before we next come on.
Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on it. It's often maligned, but during that time I write about it in the Century of Hitchcock, he was having a great deal of difficulty getting good stories, source material. And so Topaz was a Leon Uris novel. It was offered to him, and pretty much by Wasserman, because it was an airport novel, those big blockbuster airport thrillers.
Yeah.
And so the Cuban Missile Crisis was topical, and so it was kind of forced on him, and he didn't have any other good material that he was passionate about, so he agreed to do it.
I'm quite looking forward to these, because when I watched To Catch a Thief, I thought it's not one of his best, but it was still really good. Like when I watched it, and I was like, look, even if you just watch it to look at, it's fantastic, because Grace Kelly is in that is just, oh my goodness, she's almost not even real, and so I'm quite looking forward. Me and John always say that, just like a Scorsese film or like this, we say that even a bad one, a bad Hitchcock film is still better than most films, and that's something that we say quite a lot. And so I'm quite excited.
It's all relative, isn't it? That's the thing you're trying to get across. It's all relative, and like even the ones that people are like, oh, I'm not so sure on this one, they are always still very good, and there's still a base. I've not seen Marnie. Yeah, I've not seen Marnie or Torn Curtain, but when you think that they both came. Look at this, right? And this is why I say this is why the episode title is not wrong. It came after Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, The Birds. It's ridiculous. That could be the best 4-film run of all time. It really could. But anyway, I would have to. I must say, I'm desperate, Jamie. I'm going to give you some dates. I really want to try and watch Marnie with you, because I really want to see your reaction to it.
We'll watch it together, for sure.
Yeah, I've tell you, I'll get into more next week. But I love the score for Marnie. I think it's great. I love the fact it's Sean Connery. I think it's really interesting. Connery's in it. Just there's so much to unpick with it. Obviously, read all the behind the scenes about it. So. We'll get into it next episode. Sorry, cool. Jamie. Any more questions?
No, it's fine. No, so I mean, look, there's not. Tony, was there anything else? I've got a couple of questions for you or for all of us to discuss it, which won't take long. But was there anything else about the 1950s that you wanted to talk about?
I just think with the 1950s, I agree he was in his best run because he had that stable crew. Again, you had Robert Burks, the cinematographer. I mentioned Doc Erickson, who's production manager. Henry Bumstead, the production designer. So he really had his dream team. Robert Boyle, another production designer. So he had the Hitchcock crew. And that's where things went awry in the mid-60s because he lost... as Rod Taylor said to me when we came to The Birds, he was a great technician. Hitchcock was a great technician who surrounded himself with other great technicians. And so it was very much a collaborative effort, which is why you get these great, masterpiece after masterpiece. Not to take away from Hitchcock, because it was very much, his vision as an auteur, but there are many factors which made these films such a success. And I think the 50s were emblematic of that because he had a very core team.
Just to say, Jamie, that again, I always end up talking about David Fincher because I love David Fincher, but he also has a lot of influence from Hitchcock, and there's been a lot of similarities. But he talked famously about if his first cameraman isn't available, or his director of photography, he would delay productions for months or years, because his way of bringing that vision to life is through those people and those skilled craftsmen, whatever you want to call them. So essentially, you know, you always think of the director as the auteur and like their vision, but you've got to have the crew to be able to deliver said vision. And even with Hitchcock, it's presented later on that when it's not quite right, that's when the wheels start falling off, you know.
That's really important, actually, and I know that ultimately making films is about money most of the time, and that's all these big studios care about. And if you go and watch, I'm not sponsored by Apple, by the way. If you go and watch the studio on Apple TV, you'll kind of get like a satirical look into what it is like, and they basically get Martin Scorsese to make the Kool-Aid movie, for example. And what Scorsese is a good modern example of how he won't compromise his vision, because, for example, Killers of the Flower Moon, he really wanted his specific vision, and he said to Apple, "I really need $200 million." And so everyone was like, "Well, we're not going to give you that. The cinema, it won't do well in the cinema, and obviously Apple don't put it on as many screens, this kind of thing." But he's a person that generally won't compromise, and like same as a Tarantino type. If you think about kind of modern auteurs that kind of will never kind of just bow down to the studio. But it is interesting that you say the likes of Fincher would just wait, because of course he would, because his body of work is so his body of work is so special, and it's very much he's one of those people that does a million takes to get the right one. And so it's nice when you've got someone like Hitchcock who does work for someone like Paramount, that is still getting exactly what he wants across. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we were talking about Rear Window earlier. I think Rear Window is also like very much inspires Panic Room, because Panic Room's got that sequence where there's the guy, they're doing the torch out to try and get the neighbours' attention and that kind of thing, stuck in one location. I feel like that's like a modern take on that as well. But anyway, I'll stop talking about David Fincher now.
Nothing. And Tony, out of curiosity, what do you gravitate towards any modern directors? Like, are you mostly like are you a bit of a film buff in general, or?
Yes. The last chapter of the Century book is dedicated to all the directors we're speaking about: Fincher, Christopher Nolan. Obviously, we've spoken about Martin Scorsese and Brian De Palma, but I've been trying to widen the net to Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho.
He's my favorite. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
In my top three.
So Decision to Leave was very much based on Vertigo. And Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, he was very much inspired by Psycho. So I talk about that in the last chapter. But also female directors like Catherine Bigelow. She's very much inspired by early Hitchcock. Films like Blackmail and also Murder. And so, yeah, certainly. And if you look at directors today, I mean, even like the kind of Curtis Harrington Through the Bedroom Window, or the Girl, A View from a Train, a lot of these, Gone Girl, all of these have been inspired by Hitchcock along the way.
Oh, cool. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm so glad you mentioned Park Chan-wook is one of my all-time favorites. The Vengeance trilogy I think is fantastic, and he's a director with, I don't know, 4 or 5 masterpieces on his hands. But yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, one of the questions was, which we kind of did answer earlier on, was just around did Hitchcock invent modern auteur culture? And I kind of like the Tarantino. Nolan is, I would say Nolan today, like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino, are probably the 2 household names that your next door neighbor would probably know. But yeah, it is interesting because he kind of made that a thing, really. So Tony, you're going to be joining us for so really important for the audience. I think that's us about done. We are going to be releasing part 3 of this. Now this is going to be very weird, but you're going to be getting a Christmas episode first. So you're going to be getting a Christmas episode, kind of mid to third week of December. John and I will record a Christmas episode, and maybe I'll get him to watch the holdovers, and we'll do that. And then in January, Tony's going to be coming back. It has to be January for part 3 of this. where we're going to be discussing the 60s and 70s. Tony's got some really interesting. Tony, can you allude to or speak vaguely on what you may talk about in the next episode?
Sure. Well, my new book comes out next spring, and so very much kind of trailer for the book. And it's great. I think you're doing a Christmas episode because some of the things I have to say aren't very Christmassy. So I'd like to keep your podcast full of good cheer. So I hope you show Jimmy Stewart in A Wonderful Life. But yes, we're probably approaching the darkness of the 1960s, appropriately starting with Psycho in 1959, 1960. And where things kind of went awry in the 60s for Hitchcock, and also in cinema in general, it kind of foreshadowed a very, very disruptive time in the 1960s, what with John F. Kennedy's assassination and the civil rights and the protests and the randomness which Psycho kind of heralded. And so very happy to share the kind of dark and disturbing things. That's an intriguing taster, isn't it, for what's to come?
Excellent. Perfect. And I think I'm going to give, because John's got such a long time between now and the next episode, when we go around and watch Marnie together, I'm going to bring him Peepin' Tom, because I think that'll be a really good accompaniment to Psycho, because they're both considered. People often consider Peepin' Tom the first ever slasher, and Psycho in the next breath, and they're both very. They'd be a great pairing, put it that way. And they're very dark. So yeah, I'm actually probably the most excited for this next one, because it's got a few of his later films that I haven't seen, and Psycho is my favorite film from him, probably, which said everyone ever, So Tony, where can people buy your books from?
Amazon is the best place. Just put in my name. I've also got a website, Tony Lee Morale Books. But as I mentioned, A Century of Hitchcock. My storyboards book, if anyone wants a Christmas present, it's just had exciting news. It's going to be published in Brazil. They translated into, there we go. So it's already in English and in Japanese, and if you're from Portugal or Brazil, you can read it in Portuguese next year. So yeah, that's probably the book I'd recommend as a Christmas gift.
Excellent.
I actually had John Christmas last year. That is a true story.
Oh, did you? Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, John, when John uploads a pod, he's going to spell your name right as well this time.
I'm so sorry.
Brilliant. Anyway, you can find us, Movies in a Pod Shell, all one word, on YouTube. You can find us on everywhere you listen to them. You can go on moviesinapodshell.sumupstore.com and order yourself a t-shirt. They're only £18. We've got pre-shrunk cotton. They just don't shrink in the wash, You get your Primark t-shirt, you wash it once, and it doesn't fit anymore. These are not like that. So yeah, you can go and get one of them. Be a lovely Christmas present for I don't know, someone you love. And yeah, we're going to be back in a couple of weeks' time with a lovely heartwarming Christmas episode before Tony takes us down a dark past, So that's going to be really exciting, early Jan. Tony, thanks again so much for giving us your time and coming on to the pod. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you are, and you've been invaluable. Just being able to just talk about lots of things that no one knows about, and the next one I think is going to be even more intriguing. So yeah, thanks again for coming on, and thank you to everyone who wrote in questions. Thank you for buying tickets to our double bill. It means that we'll probably do another one actually at some point, because it done well, and it means you might get to see your Dirty Dancing Roadhouse double bill, or if John wants to play Alien 3 back to back 3 times, then yeah, we'll also do that. But yeah, Tony, we won't speak to you. We'll probably speak to you in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, have a great Christmas, and where can they find you? Sorry, on Instagram. Are you on Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's all at Tony Lee Morale. And as I mentioned, I'm doing a Christmas cruise from the 15th. If anyone's going on the Cunard to New York, so there'll be four of his lectures, pretty much. movie in a bombshell, 1 hour talks on Hitchcock throughout. So
Excellent. Well, hopefully it'll be as exciting for you as this has been. I don't know if it has, but you know. John, where can they find you? You've been doing lots of stuff for the Birmingham Panthers at the moment, haven't you? You're a celebrity.
I have. It's been busy times. You can find me at jcb.video. I haven't. We've recently launched our all-in campaign. We're on 16.2 thousand views last time I looked.
Yeah, that's good.
So
well,
that's good stuff. So yeah, check that out.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, thank you very much, guys, and say goodbye.
bye bye.